Hello, everyone. Hope everyone is doing well today. Uh, just wanted to welcome you all to our first annual, hopefully it's not annual, first ever virtual roundtable. Definitely, we'd love to get some feedback on this, as hopefully we won't, this will be the first and only virtual roundtable that we'll have to go through, but who knows. We will be recording this, so just to let everyone know, for those that may have said they would like to attend but are unable to, we will have a recording available and sent out afterwards. Ad Astra would like to start off, all of us on the call right now, and the company in general, just to let everyone know how appreciative we are with what higher ed has done and their ability to move as quickly as they have to be able to continue educating. And it's remarkable what we've seen. And so we just wanted to say kudos to you all. We really appreciate all your efforts and know that it's a ton of work that's going to continue. Also wanted to let everyone know that we'll be muting everybody for the beginning of this until we get to the actual roundtable discussion. So if you have any questions at all, feel free to raise your hand or put them actually in the discussion or chat box, and we will get to those just as quickly as we can. You know, it's been an interesting year, and so I'd just like to kick it off again by saying thank you and going over a little bit of an agenda about what we'll be discussing today. We'll start off with just the introductions for the Ad Astra team that'll be on the call today, moving into more of a presentation format on strategic scheduling for student success and financial stability. And then we'll also move into an optimizer discussion and how those schools are currently using the optimizer with the modeling of the social distancing piece, which we are getting a ton of requests about, and glad to help out where we can there. We'll also go into everyone's favorite piece, it seems like, at our Aspire conference, the Ad Astra roadmap and product journey. And then we'll get into the actual discussion where we'll have some questions that we'd like to open up with, and then also open it up to you guys asking your peers kind of any questions you may have, or just to get some feedback on what they're doing. I don't know if we can call it best practices at this point, since no one really knows what's going to work and what's not, but at least we'll get some feedback and some discussion going. And at the very end, if we have any time left for some questions and answers, we'll get into that as well. So starting off with the introductions, I'd just like to kind of go in order as we have them here. So Amanda, I'll start off with you.
Thanks, Brett. Hi, I'm Amanda Thorne. I'm the Regional Vice President for the Midwest. I joined Ad Astra in October of 2019, and I've spent the last 15 years in higher education technology, primarily in solutions and services that focus on student success and student completion. So just thrilled to be here, thrilled to be with Ad Astra, and thanks for having me.
Thanks, Amanda. And my name's Brett Adams. I'm the Regional Vice President in the Northeast region. I've actually been working for the past 5 years on the West Coast with clients and prospecting schools looking to get engaged, and heavily worked on the pathways modeling on the West Coast. Really excited to get to work in the Northeast, as it's one part of the U.S. that I haven't worked in yet. So excited to get started, and I actually got the opportunity to start in the Northeast about a month before COVID started. So my apologies if my feet are just getting wet in the Northeast. Cassie?
I'm Cassie Slana, and I'm the outreach consultant. I've been with Ad Astra for about a year now, and I work with both Brett and Amanda in the Northeast and the Midwest. And so you might see me reaching out from time to time to coordinate some meetings with them, or just connect you with the regional vice president in your area or the client success manager if you have any other questions.
And I'm Chris Triplett. Hello, my hand's really cool in there too. So I'm a sales engineer, although a lot of you that I see on the call may have known me as an implementation consultant or something like that, iterations over the last 3 or plus years that I've been with the company. But with my new role, really helping support Brett and Amanda, the sales team, really helping around the product side and and working through things. So pumped to be on, pumped to see folks like Gail, Monique, and Billy, and team out there as well. So we can chat later, but that's me. And I'll pass it off to Laura.
Hi, everyone. I'm Laura Kelly, Vice President Solution Strategy. I've been with Astra for about 11 years, a little over 11 years. I work with our clients. I do some consulting, and I just try to make sure that our services and solutions are in line with what you all need. Before coming to Astra, I was at the University of North Carolina, Greensboro for about 12 years in enrollment management in the registrar's office.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lisa Hunter. Vice President Solutions Architect at Astra. I've been with the team for about a year now. So I work with our partners and our executive sponsors to design mutually beneficial partnerships and do some consulting as well. And prior to coming to Astra, I was in higher ed for about 15 years as a full-time tenured faculty member, and I also had a variety of administrative positions, the last one of which was associate provost at the State University of New York in Fredonia. So I am familiar with your territory. I'm also from North Dakota, so that gives me an in sort of in the Midwest too. Happy to be with you.
And I'm Maggie Roberts. I'm a principal implementation consultant here at Astra. I've been implementing clients for 3.5 years now, implementing our Astra Schedule product, our room scheduling tool. So of course, I'll be the one talking about the optimizer later. You guys have probably already heard my voice talking about the optimizer if you've watched any of our optimization videos. So I apologize, you'll have to hear it some more. But before that, I was a client, worked for 2.5 years at Houston Baptist University where I scheduled events. Then I started at Astra and got to know the academic side as well. So I'm excited to talk through some of these things today with you and talk through what some of our clients are doing.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Walter Redden. I'm the Senior Client Success Manager here at Astra. I have a similar story to Laura, Lisa, and Maggie. I'm a former client of Astra's. I've been with the company a little over 4.5 years now. And prior to that, I worked at Northwest Missouri State University for about 4.5 years there, where I was the Astra Schedule System Administrator and primary event scheduler for all of our internal and external events, and assisted our registrar's office with building the course schedule. So I'm super excited for the conversations that we're going to have today. If you do have any questions throughout today's presentation, I'll be the one responsible for following up with those questions. So if we've already met, if you have my contact information, please feel free to reach out. If not, we'll provide that at the end of today's presentation. But looking forward to visiting with everyone today, and I'm going to turn it back over to Brett.
Thank you all. And this is the team that will be present on the call throughout the day. So let us know again if there's any specific areas when we get to that point that you'd like to discuss a little further. So I'd like to start it off with allowing Laura Kelly and Lisa Hunter to discuss a little bit more about the strategic scheduling for student success and financial sustainability.
So thanks, Brett. We're excited to talk to you a little bit about our new academic enterprise framework. So if you don't mind, Brett, would you just advance to the next slide? So this is a new visual that we are rolling out and having some talking points concerning how we believe that we can help institutions manage the academic enterprise. And I like to think of it a little bit as the evolution of Astra as well. So you see that there's some bubbles associated with how we might be able to work with institutions. And if we think about, some of you guys have been with us for a while, I think primarily we focused and worked in the infrastructure realm. And so you might know us from a capacity perspective, managing your calendaring and your academic space, event space. And so maybe for the first 10 years or so that Astra was in existence, that's really what we focused on. But over time, and as we continue to work with institutions, we realized that sometimes the way to influence capacity and space management really lies in a different realm, and that's within your course offerings and how you manage those. And that led us to some of our solutions like Platinum Analytics, Align, Predict, and things like that that you're familiar with today. from a schedule refinement lens. So, you know, the way that you might be able to do a better job within your space management may be with either some infrastructure steps around meeting patterns and how you're fitting things into your grid or your prime time. But on the schedule refinement side, sometimes it's about what are you trying to roll out within those spaces? Are you ensuring that your offerings are matching with what your students need in order to be able to graduate on time? So we've been doing that maybe for the last 10 years or so as well. And what we found, even in the schedule refinement lens, is that sometimes we still get into that box where we can't always answer the questions or provide additional feedback within schedule refinement because we're limited by the fact that certain students need courses, even if maybe they're not the most efficient offering that we've ever had. So that means that sometimes we have to take even a further step back from scheduling and maybe into pathways or into your instructional capacity, both from a classroom scheduling perspective as well as from an instructional instructor perspective. Do we need to think about your finances? And especially during this time from a COVID perspective, how does that impact the overall health from an institutional perspective? And then enrollment health as well. How do the cohorts of students that are coming, how do the promises that we sort of inherently make to students about how we're going to offer classes impact that schedule refinement down the road? And ultimately, we're all leading to this concept of student success. How can managing the academic enterprise ensure that students are going to be successful along their journey? Can we ensure that degree velocity is at that high rate so that students are able to graduate on time? There's a lot in the literature, of course, about all of these types of initiatives and how we can help students graduate on time, and that time is the enemy of completion. And so ensuring that students have the courses that they need, and ensuring that you all have the resources available to you when you need them to be able to deliver on that ultimate message. So having been, as I mentioned, in the registrar's office in enrollment management, student success is sort of near and dear to my heart. Listening to students describe situations where they weren't able to get a course or that extended their graduation by a semester, and the impact that that had on them was something that I heard very early in my career, and it's something that I've been working along, of course, with that ASTRA to be able to mitigate those risks for students moving forward. So we're going to drill in and talk a little bit about each one of these bubbles. And so I'm going to start on the infrastructure side. There's been a lot of research recently that discusses the impact that infrastructure can have on an institution. And you can see from the definition that we have listed here, it's really the policies and procedures, the resources that allow an institution to be able to function. And it sets the stage for, do we have the appropriate framework in place to be able to ensure that students are successful and that we're all successful in how we're doing business? So when you think about kind of changes to infrastructure or the need to have it in place, there's a lot of discussion currently about needing to have it from an intervention perspective and how it builds the initiatives that you have. And really the only way to be able to sustain and lead to true culture change is through having that infrastructure and ability there. And I think we've all experienced situations where maybe you have a core leader of initiative and maybe they move on to a different area, and sometimes that work sort of falls apart at that point. Whereas if you build the infrastructure around changes that you're making, then the systems themselves instead of the people are really what's guiding that process and can lead to that sustained student success. So one of the things, I'm sorry, Brett, one of the things I just want to mention too is we feel like infrastructure also sets the stage for the transparency, clarity, collaboration, and equity. Sometimes, especially in space management or in course offerings, we hear things like, well, this unit does it a different way than we do it, or they don't understand the space management policies associated with how things are being offered. So as long as you have that infrastructure in place, we feel like that transparency that needs to be at play can be there. So one step that almost, and you can advance the slide, that almost is a part of infrastructure is this concept of pathways. Certainly some of these bubbles overlap with one another, and you'll hear that as Lisa continues to have conversations about some of them as well. But our definition of pathways is really that idealized way for students to complete a program of study. So the language around pathways can sometimes be very heavy. So guided pathways mean something in the the industry, and it means that you're doing a lot more than just having that idealized way for students to be able to complete a pathway and a program of study. And ultimately, we're in favor of all those things. But the first step that we usually go through when we're having a conversation about pathways is just looking at some of these other names that are listed on this slide. So are we talking about an educational plan or a semester by semester guide or a degree map? All kinds of different languages used. But again, what we're focused on is, do we understand how a student would ideally flow through a program? And the really important part of that is that we know that oftentimes students don't flow through the program in that idealized way, right? So you have some students who start and maybe need a little bit of remediation before they begin in certain courses. Maybe they're a physics major and they need to start in calculus in order to graduate on time, but they have a few additional courses that they need to complete before they get to that calculus sequence. Maybe you have some students that have dual credit or transfer credit, and so that impacts how they would flow through that program. But as long as we know that ideal and we understand how students can map out that progress and how they can see that end in mind and understand how they would get there, that helps us be able to use pathways as a part of the framework to determine which levers that we can pull. So if we see that students are habitually getting a certain course late, we can look to see, is that something from a scheduling perspective where we just need more sections? We can also use that to potentially help from a schedule refinement perspective. If you have small numbers of students that need certain courses, can we figure out ways to target it into a specific semester so that you're being as efficient as possible with those resources? So pathways become, again, one of those levers that we can pull, helpful from a student's perspective and can lead to student success. The national research associated with pathways is large, so I'm sure you guys have seen all that, but it can also be a way from a scheduling perspective for us to be able to use that. We can also pinpoint situations where maybe it isn't a scheduling piece of functionality. Maybe there's an advising issue or something else that we can point to as we're looking at the pathways and how students flow through those programs to be able to advise institutions on how they can make some improvements. The final one that I'm going to talk about today is schedule refinement. This is the one that I'm most familiar with, of course. So it seems like I've been working most of my career within the schedule refinement area. So it, from a definitions perspective, is the process that institutions use to create a schedule, the process they go through, how they revise it, how they make it available during the scheduling and advising and registration process. And it's also a lever for how they may be able to be a responsible steward from an institutional perspective as well. So in the old days, from a Platinum Analytics perspective, I used to always say we're combining student demand and institutional effectiveness together. There is a balance there. And so you almost can't have one without the other, or you end up on either end of the spectrum. So the purpose behind this, of course, is to take the process that we use, most of us use today, which is that roll forward schedule that might be a little bit more faculty centric, make changes based on faculty, and instead we want to be sure that that schedule refinement is using data, and that's a core piece of the framework in general, is how do we use data to help inform how we need to do business. But what this allows us to do is make some subtle changes usually to the schedule, but that have high impacts, so that ultimately when students go to register, courses are available to them, that they can get it conflict free, that we can advise you from an institutional perspective how you might be able to roll out those course schedules in a way that utilizes your capacity effectively. And again, that we're being that responsible steward, that we're using our financial resources, which, you know, if we think about it, we know that about 60% of our overall budget comes from the instructors and the spaces that are involved in that scheduling process. And again, the ultimate goal always is focusing on student success and their ability to move through those programs as quickly as possible. So I'm going to turn it over to Lisa and let her continue to describe some of the other bullet points along the way with this framework.
Perfect. Thanks, Laura. So before I get started with enrollment health here, I'm just going to start with a little story about my time at Fredonia. I had a very large portfolio as associate provost, and two initiatives that I was assigned, gosh, in my first 2 months actually. One was an outcome of a faculty retreat, and that was to move from faculty-centered scheduling to student-centered scheduling. which I'm sure, as from what Laura's described already, you can see the importance of the role that Ad Astra played in that. But the other project that I was assigned was related to our financial sustainability. And I won't go into great detail, but those two initiatives somehow found their way into being very much interrelated. And I constantly was bouncing around all of these circles because everything, that dotted line in between each bubble is really important, meaning that everything's interrelated. And while this infographic is nice and simple with just one dotted line, truly there's a dotted line from one bubble, you know, to everyone in terms of how they're related. So when we're thinking about enrollment health, we're at a very broad and high level, we're talking about the relationship between enrollment and sustainability. For us, that means thinking about enrollment in the academic program, but also enrollment in the pathway itself, and then drilling down even a layer further, the enrollment in the courses and the sections themselves inform the enrollment in the pathway health and the enrollment health. And so an important piece of this is to just keep in mind that every course offering, every decision, every scheduled decision impacts the program completion. The student outcome can impact the student outcome, as well as the financial outlook for academic operations. And when in our best intention at institutions, we I think sometimes believe kind of across the board that offering lots of options for students is what serves them best, because we know that students' lives are complex, especially the lives of the post-traditional student. But sometimes those decisions to offer lots of options in different ways can actually impede our ability to be sustainable, and can actually impact the student's ability to make decisions. And so, for example, let's say we have an academic program at an institution and we've got more than one campus. So the first decision, maybe in order to create lots of access, is we're going to offer that academic program on all 4 of our campuses. And then to further accommodate students, because their lives are complex, we decide at each of those campuses to offer a day cohort option and an evening cohort option. So now we've just taken, let's say that's a program that enrolls even 100 students. Now we've divided the 100 students into 25 at each campus, let's say, if it even divides evenly, which would be rare, right? But let's say it divided evenly and we'd have 25 students at each campus. And then we've divided that into 2, into a day cohort and an evening cohort. So we've divided, again, if we waved our magic wand and divided that population in 2, we've divided that those students into a day cohort of 12 and an evening cohort of 13, let's say. And you can imagine the progression from there and what that means in terms of course offerings. So we wind up sort of fragmenting what would be a healthy cohort of students by creating so many options for students. And that just kind of dilutes the enrollment from an academic program level and then down through the pathway. So an example of kind of diluting like a pathway, this used to happen to me all the time at Fredonia. We would have a particular academic program that was probably low enrolled to begin with, and then that program would have 3 or 4 tracks within that pathway. And so it was fine while everyone was taking the same set of courses, but once you got to the particular set of 3 or 4 courses that distinguished the track itself, now the program, that particular track was really diluting and fragmenting that program. And so when you think about maybe the low enrolled courses at your institution, it could be that the low enrolled course is actually a symptom of a greater problem, right? It could be a symptom of the way the pathway was designed itself or the way it's being implemented in the course schedule, but it also could be a symptom that the higher level enrollment health in that academic program is not very strong. And it's not necessarily just the total enrollment of the academic program, right? We have more sophisticated ways to look at enrollment health by looking at the ways that students are moving through their pathways, and looking at what courses they're actually taking as opposed to what courses are in the pathway, and especially in areas where there's lots of course choice. So this allows us a more, I think, elegant way to look at enrollment health, just sort of looking at the actual top level of total enrollment in an academic program is kind of a crude way to look at academic program health. And so this just provides a more robust way for leaders to kind of look at the health of their the enrollment in their academic programs, and actually use that information to make very intentional choices and decisions to strengthen their pathways and their overall outlook for the programs. Another area that we are able to help institutions with is instructional capacity. And Laura talked a little bit about this earlier, but again, at a very high and broad level, we're looking at the relationship between the enrolled students and our instructional resources. And our instructional resources is, again, mostly in personnel. For an institution, it's mostly in faculty and in faculty salary. But it's also our physical classroom spaces as well, and the relationship to that. But this is areas where we're going to look at faculty load, both current faculty load, and then what changes we are expecting and changes in our student enrollment, and how that might impact faculty load. Some institutions are interested in looking at the balance between part-time and full-time faculty, and looking at how that might impact some of the student success outcomes that they have at their institutions. So by looking at instructional capacity and really thinking about how many students are we able to handle, where are areas that we are under-resourced, and where are the areas that we're over-resourced in terms of instructional capacities, then as leaders, they again have additional data points to make decisions. And you can imagine that by informing a schedule refinement process with the instructional capacity information, especially on faculty load, leaders definitely have a deeper understanding about why some things are happening in the schedule, and ways that they might make a positive impact. And then finally, I'm going to talk about financial health. And I think, you know, in our new normal here, it's essential that leaders understand the financial impact of their decisions. And I think we mean that down to a detailed analysis. So before, I might know that canceling a low enrolled section, and if I reallocate those resources to another instructor to resolve a bottleneck, I know that in general, that's a strong decision that's going to have a good financial impact and impact my student success positively. But as a leader, I might not understand to what extent. So by looking at the financial health specifically of an academic program, I can really understand the impact of my decision, and I can think more strategically about how I am reallocating resources or areas that might need additional resource. So, you know, if I'm going to, if I have a number of bottlenecks to resolve, I may look at the financial health of particular academic programs, and coupled with enrollment health, if I see an academic program that's growing versus being flat or actually declining, and I have limited resources to invest, again, I just have another data point to inform that decision. And I think it's really more and more leaders have, especially academic leaders, have just moved in this direction and really wanting to know the true cost of the academic program, and not necessarily where the cost is allocated to even. We're not they're not so much interested in knowing who's paying for it, because it's all coming out of the same academic affairs budget. But again, if I understand the cost and which programs are generating revenue, then I can use that information to help sustain some programs that might not generate as much revenue, and use that information in a meaningful way. And so again, together it goes well with enrollment health, thinking enrollment health and financial health together, but you know, schedule refinement, every decision, the way we build out our pathway impacts financial health, the way we use our instructors and instructional capacity impacts our financial health. And then of course our infrastructure is, and being able to understand those decisions and to support all of those decisions makes everything intertwined. Not to harp on it, but in this time, I think we all, it's all relative for us, using those finite resources and realizing our mission. And if our mission is to transform students through the great education that we provide at the institution, that's going to start with the curriculum design and of course the integrity of the curriculum and the student learning outcomes. And once we have our curriculum, then we start to implement that through the pathway design. And so we want to take great care in that pathway design. And then once we have the pathway, that pathway gets implemented through the course schedule. And that's sort of the first layer of ensuring our student success, our student outcome, but also managing our resources to be financially sustainable, and looking at sort of that trajectory from the curriculum all the way through the course schedule. And it really could be a cycle. Sometimes we learn things through the schedule refinement process that impacts the way we want to revise a pathway, and then that impacts an actual curricular revision. So it really is a process that in a cycle that informs itself. And then once we get to the course schedule, we have really 4 levers that we can use to sort of manage our financial sustainability and our student outcome as well. And that's our time, space, faculty, and students. And I think we talked about those in each of those circles, but this is just another way to frame it in terms of, I think I mentioned this before, like a low enrolled course could be a result of time, but it could also be a symptom that there's something wrong in the pathway, or something even wrong in the curriculum, right? That there needs to be a change in the curriculum. It could just be a symptom. So we want to be thinking about all of these levers which we have to impact both our student success, but also our financial sustainability. So we know, and Brett mentioned this at the beginning, that your work may feel very challenging, and kind of maybe hopefully kind of taking a step back and thinking about things at this broad level with us has been helpful for you. It's possible that today you have one scenario, and tomorrow you'll be notified that you're working with another scenario modeling process. And I think some of you may even be in situations where the institution is waiting for more information before making a decision what the fall will look like. Or maybe just still in a time of indecision, trying to weigh all of the options. But we know that with, you know, even all of that uncertainty, one thing that you can count on is you and your individual unwavering commitment to your students and to your institution's mission. You all have it, you demonstrate it through your work every day, and knowing all of you, that's why you're here today, to learn more, to share your expertise with others, and we are so grateful to that. And, you know, we wanted to say today that we see you, we thank you, and we're really honored to be supporting you. Your institution's mission and your purpose is really your big why. If you're familiar with Simon Sinek's work on finding your why, you know that your personal why is important, but you also know that your organization or your institution's why is important. And it's important for sustaining your energy, When it gets low, it's important for sustaining your enthusiasm and to lift up others in support of students. And so as you are moving through the rest of the conversation today, I hope you can tap into not only your personal why, but really your institution's why. Why does your work matter? Why does the work of the institution matter? It's really easy to get caught up in the solutions, and right now, and we're going to walk you through it, right? The scenario modeling and how are we going to figure this out? But we also know that, and for those that work with us in our teams, that it is the true meaning of bringing it back to the students that makes it all worth it. And so, you know, we want to remind you of the impact that you make each and every day with the work that we do, with the work that you do, and when you start with your why. So at Astra, we really start with the idea of valuing our students and believing that they can be transformed through the process of education. And that drives us every day at Astra. And we hope that that enthusiasm and that passion also helps to lift you up. So thank you for tuning in to our presentation. And if you have any questions about anything that we presented here, or want to talk more with us on that, just let Walter know, let Brett know, let Amanda know, and we'll be happy to extend that conversation. Thanks so much.
Well, thank you so much, Laura and Lisa. That was that. I know that topic is probably front of mind right now, going on all across campuses, and it's more so something I think that's a point of focus now, but it's obviously an ongoing concern for a lot of colleges and universities. So we appreciate that. Moving to an optimizer discussion, I'd like to hand it over to Maggie Roberts.
Great, thanks, Brett. So we're going to be talking through how some of our clients are using the optimizer during this time to work with social distancing, basically changing up how they normally use it. Some people are actually using it for the first time because they are totally out of their depth with how to schedule these rooms. So if you want to go ahead and go to the next slide, Brett, we'll talk through different pieces. And the biggest one to first talk about is there are limitations with just how the optimizer is built in the software, because the optimizer's MO is I want to use every single room in a classroom to make sure that we have a high seat fill utilization and we have as many students taking a course as we can. And that's obviously the opposite of what we want right now. We have clients who want to use only 50% of the room to allow a seat in between each student, or maybe even some people will be asking for less than that. Maybe they only want to use 30% of the room to allow even more maximum social distancing. So you will want to come up with kind of what your institution needs and wants. And I know that is totally something that is very much up in the air. People want to see 6 different scenarios. What do we do? What if we do 50%, 35%, 25% online only? I know you guys are dealing with a lot right now, and that's why we are here to help. So one of the main things that we do first with the updated room capacities is that when we have clients who are asking for test sites so that they can have some updated room capacities. And this started from a conversation we had with a client who was like, well, we can't do a maximum seat fill percentage. We can only do a minimum seat fill percentage. So how can we tell the optimizer, you know, that we only want to use half of the room? And so what we do is in a test site, we actually cut the size of the rooms in the test site to where the optimizer can still absolutely optimize all the way to all 50 seats, but it's actually a 100-person room and there's only going to be 50% of the room used. One thing I want to point out too is if you're planning on having more of a hybrid schedule where, you know, maybe you have a 100-person class, it's a Tuesday, Thursday class, but only 50% of your students are going to come each day. 50% are going to come on Tuesday, 50% are going to come on Thursday. You can optimize as you normally would with your rooms, as you know, you're still only going to be using 50% of them. You don't need to update your room capacities. That's one thing to think about, that you don't need to do that there. You can, you know, continue doing everything like you would in production, since you know only half your students will be there. Another option that some people are doing also in production is they're just adding another room configuration. Those can be done at the room level. You of course always have one default room configuration with the capacity number that pops up when you're using the optimizer or even just using the room scheduling tool. You can create another one and make it temporarily the default. And we have clients that are doing that to show, excuse me, to show a secondary room size so that they would still be able to see, here's the original room size, here's our COVID room size, and be able to assign to those. That's helping some people who are allowing event scheduling in the fall as well. So those are our room size ones for social distancing, allowing students to have chairs in between them. Another one that people ask about is if they want to have social distancing between classrooms. So let's say you have 4 rooms on the first floor of a building and you want to use every other room. Let's put every other room in a region and optimize only to that region, because you can select a region when you go into the optimizer. So that's one thing that people are also doing, is exploring the use of regions. There's also some people who are using those, maybe they completely leave labs out and they optimize those separately because maybe labs are still, being assigned as normal since there's already maximum social distancing, things like that. I will say a lot of our clients are doing a combination of manual and optimization work. If you're a client that normally does maybe 95% optimization, get ready to maybe do some manual things, because we're not going to be able to tell the optimizer to do some of the things that your institution, your higher ups want, because that's just not the way it's built. We have some clients who are taking really large classes and just manually assigning them to an online room. Of course, they'll happen to go in and double book that over and over again because maybe you only have one online room. But that's just another option that they are using. So those are our 2 options on kind of social distancing using your room sizes and then regions. And then I also wanted to bring up preference sets within this piece, because if you're doing all sorts of different things with your rooms, your preference set probably needs to be looked at a little bit. You can always clone a preference set to go in and make some changes. If you have English classes always going into a certain building, but those English classes are the same size and now all those rooms are smaller, you got to find a new place for those English classes. Maybe we're going to switch some math classes and English classes out. Maybe it just needs to be a more broad, open option when running the preference sets. Maybe your lectures just need to go into lecture or classrooms, and your seminars can go into the same type of thing. It's just looking for whatever rooms are available to make this schedule fit. There are a lot of faculty I know that like to teach in certain places, but there are a lot of students that just want to go to class in the fall. So maybe this is the way to do that, because we're always student focused first when we're talking about optimization and using rooms well. Okay. So those are just a few things that I wanted to bring up while you're thinking about going through optimization. I know that nobody's really made any big decisions yet. We've had a few clients make some decisions, but I know you guys are still just kind of waiting to hear what your president or your provost tells you to do when it comes to room assignments, because we're all just kind of on the edge of our seats waiting to see what happens. If you're wanting to scenario model any of these things, to give reports over to someone and just show, this is what it would look like for us to assign rooms in this way, I would absolutely recommend a test site. We have information on that written in our Academic Planning Resource Center, which is on our website. We have an article all about social distancing for fall. We also would love for you to reach out to Walter. His information is at the end of this slide deck. He's your client success manager. He will be able to get you in contact with anybody that if you need additional training or just have these conversations with you. He's had them with, I assume a majority of his clients already. But you can also just straight submit a support ticket in our new support center to get that information out there, get a test site started, and we can run a script to update those room capacities for you. We've been doing those based on room type and or region to get them updated in bulk so that you don't have to go in and manually change them all. But we're here to help you as much as we can with our product and the way that it is, and be able to rig it and be flexible to where we can get where we need to be for fall 2020. And we'll be doing the same thing for spring 2020, depending on whatever the world wants to throw at us then. So if you guys have questions on this, like I said, feel free to reach out to Walter or submit a support ticket. And then if we have Q&A at the end of today. So if you have some questions that you want to answer, I'll be happy to look at those as well.
Great, thank you, Maggie. I know we have had quite a few clients come to us with the optimizer usage and looking at those different scenario modeling options. So it's been a large part of our interaction with clients recently. So thank you for your help with that. Moving to our next presentation is with Chris Triplett, and the one like I said, seems to be everyone's favorite is the Ad Astra roadmap and product journey. So with that, Chris, I will turn it over to you.
Sure, it's not just me, right? It's the actual presentation title, correct? That's why it's everyone's favorite, right, Brett? Yeah, well, you know, a little both. So I appreciate you guys giving me about 10 minutes or so just to walk through kind of where we're at from a big picture perspective, what you can expect coming out over the next year or two, and kind of our philosophy around development as it's kind of ebbed and flowed over the last few years even. And even over the last 6 months. And so, Brett, if you don't mind jumping to that next slide. So I have a couple of just visuals. If you've gone to previous Aspire conferences, you're a member of our CAB, you've watched some of our webinars or listened to podcasts, we've talked about this quite a bit over the last year, and specifically ramping up over the last 6 months. But really, our whole new philosophy is kind of an app-based approach to how we're rolling out our new products. And so for those of you that have had analytics in the past, Platinum Analytics, you very well know that we are moving to that app-based approach. We're moving towards 2 new applications, one being Monitor, which is registration tracking. Historically, we've done registration snapshotting, but in the form of PDFs, Excel files that are sent out via email. This is a completely online based tool that really allows for more ease of use and a lot of collaboration. And Monitor is kind of that first one that's been rolled out on this new platform. The other one is going to be Align. Align is, at its heart, is historical enrollment trends to be able to serve up course change candidate recommendations. So based off of historical enrollment data, what have students taken? Where are you offering maybe too many seats or sections for particular courses they're just always not filling? Or where is the inverse of that, where you've got courses that may be bottlenecking that could be causing pent-up student demand. And so you may not be serving the students the best way that you can because you're not offering enough sections. And I know sometimes you can never offer enough sections of certain courses, it almost seems like. But that's really what the idea is. And once again, it's a collaborative tool that allows for cross-departmental use, one-stop shop kind of scenario where folks are in there building the course schedule. Now, along with Align, we're also rolling out Predict. It's Align with Predict. So there's really just 2 apps, Monitor, Align. Align with Predict adds on additional data points that will include both student academic history, and then as Laura mentioned earlier, that concept of pathways or the sequence of courses that ideally a student would need to take as they're progressing through their program of study or their certificate or whatever it might be. And so when you layer in Predict with Align, you're getting a lot more data. So it's a very refined group of data that's going to be looking at, okay, based off of what students have taken and what program of study they're in and what pathway they're on, we're going to be able to identify not only what the students need to take in the upcoming term, but looking at it from the lens of here are the number of seats you need to offer. And so when you look at it that way, we can blend in both historical trends as well as what you've got from a predictive demand to really get you some great data to inform how you're building your schedule. So we're excited because Monitor, Align, and Align with Predict are getting there. Monitor's been out for a little while now. I will say if you haven't jumped on the free trial piece of that, reach out and jump on. There's some chances there. We'd love to get you, at least show it to you and get some feedback from you. And then Align as well is kind of rolling out as we move into the fall and planning for spring 21. And I say feedback too, because with these new apps as well, we've introduced integration with our help site and our client support center. that allows for automatic feedback or issues you may be having right within the app that you can go in and log. And so, in the 3+ years I've been at Astra, that's never been there. There's always been almost like a moderator in between as you're logging cases sometimes, and a lot of that in this case is Walter. And so this allows you to have kind of direct access to the folks that are actually behind building the products and really getting in their ears, which is really cool. So super excited about those pieces. And then as we move forward into fall, late fall, winter, early 21, really what we're looking at is finishing out building the schedule process. So right, it's the planning process. It's great to know, and you need to know kind of what you're capable of offering to your students, and from a sections and seats perspective, as we talked about predictive demand and historical demand. But it's also important that you're able to look at the other resources that come into play, like your space, with the instructor capacity, and looking at when the time factor, as Lisa said before, those other resources that are just as important. And so what we're looking at building out over the next 6 months to a year is, and maybe even sooner, is really the idea of that end-to-end kind of scheduling component. I know we've talked about in the past, but truly being able to find those other resources, build out your schedule, and taking it to that next level. And so, and eventually writing that back into the student information system. And in doing this, it also leads into a lot of other components around kind of how we are iterating on our builds. So within this new architecture, with these new apps, we don't have to schedule upgrades, right? We don't have to go through and you have to put in a case to upgrade into a new platform as you would Astra Schedule right now even. It's automatic updates, so it's like Google. You don't know what version of Google you're on when you go there. You just expect it's going to work for you. And that's the same concept here. We push out hundreds of upgrades every day as we make fixes, as we add additional pieces and elements into the system. And so with that said, even yesterday, I was demoing in the morning and one feature wasn't there, and then 30 minutes later, it was. And it's like, cool, I knew this was going to happen at some point this week, but it happened today. That's great. That's super cool. It's added, extra enhancements to what I was talking about with the schools. And so the iterative piece, though, is that as we build out this new schedule framework of being able to add instructor, room, time, all of those pieces, it means we have to build other components to make that possible. And in building those other components, invariably, we're going to be working on building out things that will add to the Astra Schedule experience later on. Because the idea is that we're going to build out the Astra Schedule experience inside the same kind of small app-based components. And Brett, if you can jump to the next slide. With this piece, you can see here is you're going to see the Astra core replacements are already starting. And so the fun part is that, for example, in order to make the schedule full building process happen, we have to be able to find rooms. In order to find rooms, we have to have calendaring type capabilities. We're going to have that. When we have that, it may eventually be able to replace your scheduling grids, your calendaring capabilities you have in Astra Schedule now. We're building report functionality out in new architecture, and in the same vein, that will work to make your reporting capabilities within Astra Schedule even greater. So all these components are really things that I'm jazzed about, to steal Maggie's words. I used to say and all that jazz all the time, and I think it's great. I'm really glad you brought it back, Maggie. But that is it's something that we can all get jazzed about, because it really means that we are building upon building blocks, and we have a good foundation, and it's rooted in client feedback. And so that's super cool. The other piece that I'll highlight within Astra Schedule as well, because I know there's quite a few folks on the line that are truly Astra Schedule power users. And so a couple of things we are tackling that are on the docket. One is going to be improving the user's experience by doing timeout warnings, that their session is going to time out. I know that's been a pain point for a long time for a lot of people. And so it's really the idea that your users won't be surprised by the application timing out, and minimize the instances to where they're logged out while they're in the middle of doing something. If they stepped away or if they got a phone call, you know, and timed out, it wouldn't tell them. So that's exciting. Super pumped for that. I know Walter's probably very pumped for that. So he stops getting emails and gets, you know, looped into all those things. And then ultimately, the other one that we're working on is kind of part of a larger initiative, which is really improving the integration aspects of our systems. And so we're really investing a lot, and we have over the last several months, into our data operations. So we built out kind of a dream team, let's call it that, a team of folks that were in different departments. We brought on some new people as well to form this data operations team that are specifically really diving into how are we getting the data that we need, how do we use the data that we get in this new kind of architectural format, what does that look like, and how can we really improve data flow even within the systems that we currently have. And with that, I think one of the words are two-worded things that I'll say is improving that experience that you might even have with like a task agent, where that's just not even a thing, it's a thing of the past, where that's not an issue anymore. And so, you know, that is really, really cool. And I think it'll really, enhance that experience from even a user base, to where your top problem is not necessarily getting the data that you need to have, anything getting hung up or worrying about how things are flowing, but that you just feel very confident in that managing of the flow of the data, because that's so much of the experience that you have within our application. So we are investing in people, we're investing in new tools and our new architecture as well to make that data flow faster and more reliable. And ultimately, you know, we've got, Lisa and Laura talked about these consulting services, and even with those kind of services and those framework, the right now is their consulting based. We want to build those out as product as well. So that way, you know, you can jump in and do your own cost analysis. You can jump in and be able to look at, you know, the enrollment health and things along those lines that are really just meant to make your lives better, and also to be, as Maggie loves and as she's been pushing people towards our help site, and the whole idea of self-service, right? Not to say that we aren't there to help, but we know that if we make things simple enough, which we should, and intuitive enough, which we are, that it's going to make your end user experience so much better. And ultimately we'll be able to serve up cool new things and features that are just going to enhance that experience. And so that's really where we're going from a product roadmap, a solution journey kind of thing as we go throughout the next year and beyond. And so hopefully that gives you a good idea of where we're at. And that said, Brett, I'll turn it back over to you, sir. And you may still be on mute, Brett, if you are talking.
Sorry about that. I did want to say that for those of you who are used to coming to our annual Aspire conference, users conference in October, you know that we will elaborate even more on this a lot of times. So there'll be even more information this October at Aspire. Unfortunately, this October, if you haven't heard, it will be a virtual conference. So we'll miss seeing all your faces, but at the same point, we will still have the conference in October as usual. With that, I would like to lead into the roundtable discussion, where we're going to have a few questions for you all and kind of get your feedback on some of the different ways that you are kind of working through the whole COVID scheduling component, and also open it up to allow you all to discuss or ask questions with your peers to find out kind of what they're doing, to see if that would help with any possibilities that you may be looking into currently. And like to hand that over to the moderator for this, which will be Amanda. Amanda?
Thanks, Brett. Good afternoon, everybody, again. We're really excited about this session. We really want to hear from you. So when we were planning this session for the roundtable, feedback that we heard over and over from our customers was that you wanted a forum to hear from your peers about their scenario modeling for fall and spring. So this is a great opportunity for you to share and learn from your peers. I will be calling on each of the participants, so please be ready to participate. In order to do that, you're gonna have to unmute yourself to talk. When you speak for the first time, just state your name, the role that you have at the institution, and the institution that you work with. And our team may chime in and ask you to follow up on a question, so be prepared to unmute again after you're called on. We really want this, as I said earlier, to be a space to learn. We're gonna unmute everybody through the audio, but you do have to unmute if you're called on. If you want to use the raise your hand feature, if I ask a question, I will go down the list of participants if you don't want to use that. And we also just ask that you don't talk over anybody, and please share some best practices and lessons learned. And we hope that this is a fun session for you all. I think a lot of other, we had one earlier today, and I think it was really great for them to hear all the different ways that people are dealing with this global pandemic. Brett, do you want to go on? Thanks. So I want to start it off, and I've been doing this on a few of my calls that I've had with clients lately. Is there anything positive or surprising that has come out of working remotely and having courses remote? And I am going to just go down the list if nobody raises their hand. So Alyssa, do you have something positive that has come out of working remotely? And you do have to unmute yourself. There we go.
Hello, it's actually Elisa. I think that's why.
Okay, sorry, Elisa. My apologies.
Actually, I have to say, I mean, given that we haven't been on campus yet, we haven't been able to utilize the system in any way, but I can say that we are just starting as of yesterday to start talking about reconfiguring pretty much all of our conference rooms to be classrooms and, you know, our larger spaces. So with that being said, I know we're going to have a big project of overhauling all of our capacities, which I would imagine that everybody else is going to go through with the whole spacing component. So we're looking forward to that because I know we're just going to be utilizing the system in a, you know, mostly the same way, but just easily going back and really just changing the capacities of our conference rooms and then opening up those conference rooms into the academic scheduling. So I think that's our plan.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Billy, how about you? What's something that has been surprising to you? And you have to unmute yourself. All right, I'm gonna go to the next participant because you're still muted, Billy. Bruce, is there something that was surprising? Oh, there we go.
I didn't hear my name. I'm sorry. My name.
That's okay.
I think one of the surprising things that KCTCS has benefited from with the shutdown is how flexible our faculty and staff has been at learning to work remotely. Just how quickly faculty got classes up online and was able to just accommodate the student needs and to meet student needs. I think that's been a real eye-opener for us.
That's great. And there is a thunderstorm happening right now, and I have a dog that's afraid, so she's scratching the door. So if you hear that in the background, I apologize. Chris, is there something that has surprised you from working remotely? Okay, I'm going to go on to Gail. Gail, what has surprised you? You have to unmute.
Hi. As well as having our faculty go online, also learning on what we can do for the fall and what our opportunities are to assist the students has been very beneficial for us also.
And Gail, do you mind saying what institution you're with?
Johnson & Wales University.
Perfect, thank you. So on to the next question. What scenarios are you planning for fall 2020? And I'm going to ask James to participate and unmute.
So can you all hear me? Stepping out of the wind, sorry. Do you have audio?
Yes, we can hear you. Yep.
Cool. So yes, we're nailing Jello to the wall. Many scenarios, it's sort of coalescing around a few key parts. In terms of classroom capacity, we're looking at 25% in each room. New York State requires 6-foot distance. I'm at Manhattanville College. And we are looking at having classes try and alternate in what the sometimes called a high flex model. Half the class on one day of the week and half the class on the other day. But we are trying to avoid the true synchronous high flex model, meaning the folks that are not in the classroom will be taking in their content in an asynchronous manner, rather than trying to teach both the remote students and the in-class students at the same time. Just too many moving parts, but it's sort of coalescing around an awful lot of asynchronous and a much smaller face-to-face, but with a goal of every student will see their instructor at least once a week.
That's great. And what institution are you with?
They tell me, or at least they told me this morning, it's Manhattanville College, but that could change at any moment.
Thank you. Jason, what about you? What are you planning for fall? I see that Jason is unmuted, but we're not hearing him. Maybe we can go on to Judy and have Jason answer.
This is Judy from Central Michigan University. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So Central has decided to reduce the semester to 14.5 weeks. So we will be starting early August and ending at November for all of our main campus courses. Our online courses will remain as the schedule that was set previously. We are going with a high flex model also for the majority of our courses. And we are currently in the process, because our system did not allow just a simple calendar change. We had to go into each course manually and individually. I really wish that we were on the optimizing for Astra, because that would have really helped me with changing our exam schedule and doing the classrooms now that we have had our FM department go through and do the 6-foot social distancing, and they're removing equipment from classrooms to get the number that our FM department has come up with. So it's very interesting. It brings a new challenge.
Yeah, I think everybody says, you know, somebody just said nailing Jello to a wall, and I think that's really suits it well, or throwing spaghetti against the wall and seeing what sticks. What about you, Laura? What scenarios are you modeling for fall, and what institution are you with? Okay, I'm going to go on to Mary. Mary, what about you?
Right now, we're in the process of preparing a bonus schedule proof that we're going to send out to academic departments to try to gather that data from them about mode of delivery. We don't know exactly what to expect. You know, how many of them will go 100% remote, and how many want some sort of a high flex option. And then we'll also be gathering from them what their classroom needs are.
Yeah, I couldn't catch all of that, but it sounded, I heard a little bit that you're doing a couple of scenarios. You just don't 100% know what to expect yet. And we're hearing that from other institutions as well. I'm wondering, Monique, if you can chime in on some of the scenarios that you're doing for, okay, we'll go ahead and skip you. Let's see. What about Nancy? Nancy, what are some scenarios that you're doing for fall? All right, I am gonna move on. I have, I think broken audio was pulling departments where they are on high flex spectrum. Great. So James, do you want to just elaborate a little bit on that?
Okay, so some folks use the term high flex from our friends on the academic side.
Mm-hmm.
Hybrid and flexible. That is also no longer a single definition. In the worst case scenario, it means that in each classroom, you're prepared to have whatever capacity you can fit based upon your local social distancing rule and kind of the configuration of the space, but that you're also accommodating some students in almost every class that will be online and remote. So that sort of means having video conferencing and room audio in every room, sort of like what one speaker talked about in terms of refitting each conference room as a classroom. It's just a fascinating journey. But to get there, polling each department to find out what they need to do and how they plan to deliver. So in a college like Manhattanville, some of the studio or fine arts departments, the performing arts areas, communication and media, they need to have, they're almost more comfortable with using one set of spaces. They have a harder time with an online delivery. So basically they want the biggest possible space so they can squeeze into it, or in some cases, multiple computer labs at the same time. In other cases, the class is perfectly happy moving to a fully hybrid format and stay online, perhaps with a periodic face-to-face check-in during the week. So all of these sort of fit in an umbrella of high flex, but you're going to ask each department how they're choosing to interpret that and what their unique needs might be and how those needs affect scheduling or space requirements.
Yeah, so making sure that all the departments are speaking from the same language and terms and definitions, and kind of changing your entire business process around that as well. So I think that's a good segue into the next question. Are you changing business processes and course scheduling and resource allocation during this time? And I'm going to see if Tara, are you available to answer that question? You have to unmute your microphone.
Are you referring to Tara Carroll?
Yes.
Okay. We are changing our process. The problem is the university has not announced how they're proceeding with academics. But we are coming up with different scenarios and what type of events that would be approved. Basically, following the CDC guidelines of having no more than 25 people. Of course, that may change. Not so much social activities, but anything that is related to courses or the academics, the school's mission, would be taken into consideration.
So a little bit of change around the event management piece by following the CDC guidelines and sticking to that. Vanessa, are there any business practices that your business processes that you're changing on campus? And again, you have to unmute. I'm going to go back to Elisa. Is there any business process that you're changing or around course scheduling or resource allocation?
Yes and no. Actually, the registrar, unfortunately, I'm a degree away from that area for the course scheduling. However, the resource scheduling, I can say that right now, we actually haven't been utilizing a very formal process for event requesting. I should say event resource requesting. And we are actually just using a simple Google form. And that's only because we know that Ad Astra does have that available, but we haven't really fully implemented every aspect. However, as of this week, with just trying to figure out how events and event requests will work with resources, since resources are ever evolving at this point, with a greater need for more IT resources. We were just discussing how there's going to be such great demand that we will be using Ad Astra, and we have to figure out how to add those resources, take inventory, add them all into the system, and then pretty much phase out our simple Google form of requesting resources that went to our ITS department to now go through a form within Ad Astra. So we're in the middle of brainstorming and trying to figure that out, and at the same time, training the necessary people that may not have been involved with the process before, but will surely be involved now since there's so many processes changing. So it's ever evolving.
Great. And I think reaching out to our team, especially Walter, to get support during with that is something that we can offer to you. Todd, did you have any business processes or that you're changing or resource allocation that you're changing on campus? And you do have to unmute yourself. Your microphone's not on.
I'm sorry, were you talking to me?
Yeah, Todd.
Yeah,
just asking about any business processes that have changed or resource allocation that has changed on your campus.
Well, when you were talking to Mary, we're co-workers at the same university, and she mentioned, and we're trying to fit this in. We're changing a business process where we're having to sort of send out a third proof to departments. Typically, we do a two-step phase for scheduling, but we've actually had to add a whole other round, and so it's major when you try to fit that into your existing already very tightly resourced business processes.
Mm-hmm. Mhm. And so how are you adapting to that? What are some of the tricks or that you
Well,
can share?
I think we're making it up as we go.
Yeah.
You know, it's like at first we thought we might try a abbreviated approach to the fall schedule, but since so much is still up in the air, we thought they really need one more time to take a look at things, and of course that adds to the amount of work that our schedulers have to do, and that the people out in the departments have to look at this for a third time. But since, like we've said, we're throwing Jello at the wall,
Yeah.
I guess that's just what we're doing. But yeah, that's just one example of a that's a major change to a production cycle, to add a third round of something.
Absolutely. And yeah, squeezing that into a tight time frame is a challenge. So it's probably adding, you know, additional work not only to your efforts, but to the deans and the department chairs.
Oh,
efforts.
absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious, what ways do you think Ad Astra can help you all? And I'll just throw this out to the group and maybe just call on a couple of people. Billy, is there something that we can do better to help you and the KCTCS team at this time?
The only thing that I don't think that there's anything that Astra can do to help us. I think it's just the continual matter of getting folks to realize the advantages of paying attention to scheduling and understanding the tools that are before them. You know, Astra has powerful tools. It's certainly has many benefits of the optimizer features. If the folks out at the colleges, including my colleagues who are on this roundtable discussion, would embrace a little bit of pain up front and fully utilize Astra to its fullest capabilities, it could save a lot of time and a lot of headaches of trying to figure out which rooms are available at what times to combat this COVID situation.
Great. And Walter is your client success manager, you know that, and we're willing to support you in whatever way necessary to help your campuses utilize the tool effectively. So please let us know how we can do that for you. Is Bruce still on? Is there anything Ad Astra can do better to support your efforts?
Hello?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, hi. Nothing too specific that I needed to share in that regard. I would say that we are currently still transitioning from version 7 to version 8, and we're anticipating a meeting to go over some of the headaches we've had in that transition, and obviously the new complications with the current situation. So, but nothing specific springs to mind.
Okay, great. And Chris, how about you? Is there anything that Ad Astra can do to better support your efforts? Okay, I'm going to go on to Gail. Anything we can do better, Gail?
Well, I appreciate the roundtable because I did get some ideas from you regarding the optimization possibilities. Because I was at a loss, like they kept on saying, how can I do this? And I was saying, I don't know yet. I haven't figured that part out. So I do appreciate that. Some of the ideas that you had as far as running the script to reduce the class sizes is a possibility on my end. So we would probably be looking at contacting Walter regarding how do we accomplish that. We do have a test site, and that's one of the things that we would like to do is put it in the test site to see what is the best capability for us to do. So I will be reaching out. Thank you.
Great. Well, we're glad to hear that we can help you. James, is there anything we can do better to support your efforts?
Well, as always, if you have a good line on single malt scotch, I think sending that to each client is probably something we all need right now. And the other part is, as we look ahead to the fall, agility is probably going to matter. And I think what we're all going to find is while we room a class into a space, the space could break down or be missing a technology. The class composition could have students that don't work in that space. And we may find that there's a population of faculty that are not comfortable or safe coming back to campus. Mm-hmm. So I've sort of been picturing how to use, forgive me, the current scheduling tools to let folks tell us. For instance, I was describing earlier today, if we start leveraging outdoor spaces and we say you can have the lower half of the quad, but you got to set up your chairs in a distanced way, that's going to be based upon weather forecasts, as well as the presence or lack of presence of students with perhaps mobility issues in that particular class section. So I think there's going to be a whole lot of need to really soup up the workflow and the way we're leveraging some of the scheduling tools now. That, and please don't forget the scotch.
Chris says he's got you, so I don't know. He might be following up with you on sending some scotch your way. Jason, is there anything that Ad Astra can do to better support your efforts? Did we lose Jason? I think so. Okay. I'm going to go on to Judy. Is there anything we can do to better support your efforts?
Honestly, there would have been a lot of things that I would have liked to have asked if I had some time. This would have been a perfect opportunity for us with the COVID capacity to try to get the rooms in place. However, we didn't have the time to get all the information into the system that we needed. So yeah, there were probably things that you could have, but I just didn't have the time with everything that came up to devote to asking those questions. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's always that balance, right?
Yeah.
I'm being put in this situation and I don't really have, I have to be in reactionary mode and I don't really have the time to step back.
Right. And there's things that we had just transitioned to 8 and we're supposed to be doing a re-implementation. And so that was something that kind of got put back on the back burner. And to be honest, I don't know what I don't know. So I don't know all the features that you have that could have helped me. And I didn't have time to dig through and figure it out. And that's not, I'm not faulting Astra, that's on me because of the responsibilities that I had here.
And that's understood. I mean, I think we're all in this time, especially, time is a commodity, right? And it's probably the most valuable commodity that we all have. And so that makes a lot of sense. But if we can help you save time and make your job easier, we want to be a resource to you. So just know that.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Here. Is Laura still on? Laura, is there anything that Ad Astra can do to better support your efforts during this time? Did we lose Laura? I think we did. Okay. How about Mary Holland?
We'll probably be in touch when it comes time to change capacities in Astra. And maybe you have a quick answer for this because I'm just sort of trying to noodle it. If you have in Banner a 60 max class that has 60 students, in it, but only 20 of them are going to attend in person, face to face. How do you set that up in Astra so that that classroom, which ordinarily would hold 60, you set the limit at 20, but it's coming over from Banner with 60 max, so it's not going to assign to that room of 20.
So one of the things that I know Banner has, I'm going to jump in and take this one, Amanda, is a projected enrollment field. And we have many times pulled from that field. It's a pretty easy spoke file change to where if the projected enrollment field is populated, we'll pull that in as the max enrollment rather than your actual max enrollment. So that might be something that we could leverage for that, to where 60 students are going to enroll, and even though the projected enrollment's 20, that's just the number that we're going to use. I mean, I don't know if that affects anything else in Banner. That's my Banner ignorance, but I know that we can pull that number in and optimize to that number.
Okay, that's helpful.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And Walter, do you want to just share, like, if they need additional support in that area, how do they go about doing that?
Yeah, Mary, I mean, for you and to anyone else that's on the call, if any of these examples that we're talking through, if you're wanting to test these out in the test site, feel free to reach out to me. We can have a more in-depth conversation on how we might need to utilize the test site for your individual needs. That's usually about a 4 to 5 day turnaround process for us. So once we request that site, we'll be able to get you a copy of that. Then we can talk through the different ways to, like I mentioned, utilize that site, whether we need to run a script to reduce the room capacities, consider how we're running the optimizer. I'm definitely more than happy to have those conversations with you. If you are needing that sooner than what you can find time to visit with me, you can always log a ticket through the support center to request that test site. A member of our support team is always monitoring those tickets, so they'd be able to get to you just as fast, if sometimes quicker than what I will be able to. But for any of these scenarios that we've walked through, myself as well as the other members on this call today, we're all willing and able to help you get through this time. So just reach out. And again, my contact information will be in the last slide here of this deck.
So I'm going to throw it out to the team, and I'm off video because my dog is on my lap panting. She was on my desk too. She hates thunderstorms. So I will show you real quick her. And then I'm going to throw it out to the team or the group. Are there any other questions that we didn't ask that you were hoping to get answered, or that you want to throw out to your peers at this time? Thanks, Maggie. That's a good reminder. If anybody wants to ask in the Zoom, they can ask questions there too, if that's more comfortable.
And Amanda, this is Brett. I actually, if there's no current questions, I did have some questions to ask the attendees if they wouldn't mind.
Sure, absolutely.
Bring up. So I guess one of my big questions is, how has using data or the inability to use data kind of affected some of the scenario building that you have been trying to accomplish for fall? Gail, would you be able to field that one?
One of the things that we had issues with is trying to figure out how much enhanced technology that we needed. So that was inability to use the system, because I needed to see what our plan would be for that number. So going forward, I think it would be useful for us to use the system.
Excellent.
Anybody else want to share their data needs, maybe something they wish they had access to that they don't have access to today that would be helpful?
Another thing, Amanda, that had come up on our earlier session was the discussion about the cleaning of rooms in between the classes, and would love to kind of get some feedback on, especially I guess the lab rooms. How has that kind of changed your scheduling, if at all, as far as maybe the time delay increased in between classes, if any?
This is Tara, University of Pennsylvania, Wharton Business School. We are not able to add time in between classes. However, most of our classrooms have 2 doors leading into the space. So we're working on having one door dedicated as entrance only and the other door as exit only. And then we're also working on having the student or whoever is entering the room clean their own space. So we're providing wipes for them to wipe down their spaces. So that's one way that we're looking at being able to clean the rooms. We're also limiting activity in the classrooms Monday through Thursday. Those days are primarily dedicated towards academics, and then having Friday, Saturday, and Sunday for co-curricular activities or other types of meetings.
Well, that's very interesting. Thank you for sharing that. Judy, would you be able to answer that? Or Mary? Mary, I know you've had some good feedback.
We haven't really been in on the conversations about how the cleaning's gonna progress, but early on, we said that with students enrolled, we didn't see that we had the capability to put time between time blocks. So for fall, the schedule is what the schedule is. But yeah, so I don't have any specific information on how the cleaning will be accomplished.
Yeah, I think that's been the tough conversation that was had earlier was we don't have the time to add on any time in between the classes, and kind of some of the options that were being thrown out there as far as some of the other schools, what they were kind of doing. And I do really like the point that was made about having the students kind of wipe down their own desk when they get ready to leave. That's a great idea. Resourceful.
All right, Brett, if you want to go to the next slide, just to pull up my contact information so that everyone can see that there. Most of you I know that I've reached out to or at least spoke with in the past, but please feel free to reach out to me if we want to continue these conversations. I took some notes during this call. There's a few of you that I plan to reach out to see if there's any need to continue the conversation. But as I mentioned before, myself, Maggie and our training team, and the rest of the client success team, we're all here to help get you through this time. We know this is challenging, and you know, we're here to help however we can. And to Lisa's point earlier in the call, we commend you for the work that you guys are doing to continue to promote student success and allow our students to continue through their education. So with that, I know we kind of had some lag there. Are there any final questions that any of our participants would like to ask any of the Astra staff or each other before we wrap up today? All right, with that, I think we'll go ahead and conclude today's session. Thank you so much, everyone, for your participation. We greatly appreciate that, and we'll be following up in the coming days to continue these conversations. Everyone stay safe, and thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you all.
Thank you,
everyone.
Bye.